Talk about the background of the Supreme Court, where they get their powers from and how they're established. And that goes to Article 3 of the Constitution. And it simply says, the judicial powers of the United States shall be vested in one Supreme Court and in such inferior courts as Congress may from time to time ordain and establish. There's not a lot in the Constitution about the Supreme Court. Article 3 is the shortest of all the articles, and 1, 2, or 3 about the judiciary or the executive. And the reason is there's no background on the Supreme Court. The Supreme Court is unlike any other court in the world, and when we were writing the Constitution, we really didn't know what it was going to do or how it was going to operate, and it was sort of thrown in here, and it developed on its own, as we'll see. Article 2 says the President shall nominate and by and with the advice and consent of the Senate shall appoint judges of the Supreme Court. It always struck me strange that the Constitution talks about judges, Supreme Court judges. We always call them justices. And I don't know where that terminology began, but for some reason we lapsed into this justices. Sounds nicer. The qualifications. The qualifications to be a Supreme Court justice is, there's only 2 requirements. The requirements are that you be nominated by the President and confirmed by the Senate. There are no other requirements. There's no requirement of age, there's no requirement of gender, there's no requirement that you are or have been an attorney, there's no requirement that you be a citizen. Instead of Chief Justice Roberts, we could have had a 3-year-old girl from Iceland. According to the Constitution, that means the President would have had to appoint her instead of confirm, but nevertheless, constitutionally, that would have been fine. Which is strange, because to be President of the United States, it says you have to be 35 years old, you have to be a native-born citizen. To be a senator, you have to be 9 years a citizen, resident of the state from which you come, and for a congressman, 25 years of age, and a citizen for 7 years. So there's other requirements more stringent than being the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court. In answer to the question, we've had 110 justices in the United States Supreme Court. 110 of them have been attorneys. Okay? They haven't all gone to law school. Remember, back in the old days, we read at the law. We worked in a law office, we studied under a lawyer, we passed an exam, and we became an attorney. The last 2 justices who did not go to law school were in 1943 and 44. Did not go to law school. That's pretty recently. One of them was Robert Jackson, who was the presiding prosecutor at the Nuremberg trials. He did not go to law school. And the other one, my hero, Jimmy Burns. Jimmy Burns dropped out of school at the age of 14 and never returned. Never. He worked as a court reporter, he worked for a lawyer, he became an attorney. He was appointed to the court eventually. He served on the court for only about 2 years, and then President Roosevelt asked him if he wouldn't mind resigning so he could appoint him to be the head of the Office of Price Adjustment and Price Stabilization during World War II. When World War II ended, Harry Truman, then president, appointed Jimmy Burns as our Secretary of State. And he never went beyond the age of 14 to school. I tell my younger audiences, don't try that, though. Confirmation process, we have one underway right now. Surprisingly, the Senate has rejected about 1 out of 5. And if you think back to the last 20 years or so, the number is probably higher than 1 out of 5 being rejected. You can think of a bunch of them: Hainsworth, Carswell, Bork, just off the top of my head, and that was more than got appointed. So 1 out of 5 overall is historically. So those are the qualifications. This is one of the controversial articles of the Constitution, and the judges, both of the Supreme and inferior court, shall hold their offices during good behavior. That's interpreted to be for life. Okay?